Hi, and welcome to my channel, You Are What You Think. Reading is now one of my favourite things to do. I get up at 5 o'clock every morning to give myself a couple of hours of good, solid reading time in quiet before I start work. But it wasn't always this way for me. When I arrived at high school, I'm not sure that I'd ever read an entire book cover to cover. As a kid, in my spare time, I'd be running around in the field or down the forest playing Jurassic Park with my friends, or if I was at home, I'd probably be playing on my Nintendo 64 or my Atari. Yes, I am old. Books, though, didn't really feature in my life as a child too much. I loved stories, but I didn't love books so much. And so I arrived in high school, confident and eloquent enough, but my spelling and grammar were atrocious. And my hero, Mrs. Abbott, who was my teacher, she took me aside and decided to give me some sort of test to see if there was something we were dealing with, maybe some mild form of dyslexia or something. She took me for the test, and after the results came in, she realized that I wasn't dyslexic after all. I was just really lazy. And so that lunchtime she took me to the school library and she chose two books for me. One was a boys' adventure novel by Willard Price called South Sea Adventure, and the other was a book called Redwall by Brian Jacks. I can't even begin to explain to you the impact that this one event had on my life. I devoured those series and still reread them even today. And so, one random September back in the late 1990s, I fell in love with reading. And I've read thousands of books since then. And the contents of some of those books have changed my world, transformed my thinking. I honestly can't imagine who I'd be without Mrs. Abbott and without those books. Now, today, I'm obsessed. I can read anything between 60 and 100 books a year, depending on the genre and how much time I have. Fantasy, biography, economics, philosophy, finance, investing, self-improvement, politics, political theory, you name it. And when people find out that I read so much, 9 times out of 10, they'll ask me, well, how do you do that? How do you love reading so much? And so, let me just give you 6 thoughts from a passionate book lover on how you can read better. First is to recognize the power of reading. This is something that perhaps people aren't too familiar with if they don't know their history too well. But books and reading used to be out of reach to most people alive, people like you and me. Being able to read and having access to books was reserved for those in power, and also was a tool to keep those same people in power. The church and the state in Europe for well over 1,000 years reserved the very power of salvation for themselves by safeguarding books and reading from the masses. Keeping information out of the hands of the people was a means of control and a tool for tyranny. And we see that today, by the way, all over the world. State and other organizations withholding information from their citizens as a form of tyranny and control. Anyway, back to medieval Europe. And then the printing press opened up a new world where books could be made far more easily available and printed in such a way as to make them accessible to ordinary people. And so, as literacy spread across Europe, the continent was dragged kicking and screaming out of the darkness of the Middle Ages and into the light of the Renaissance. Real watershed in history that, impacts our daily lives even today. But the story of the power of the written word, of course, doesn't end there. Since then, Newton, Darwin, Kant, Marx, and thousands of others have literally changed the course of history through their ideas written down in books. And the same is true on a less grand scale, on an individual level. Books have changed the course of my whole life entirely. I am not the person I was 20 years ago. I'm not the person I was 10 years ago or 5 years ago even. My path is unrecognizable from the one I was on. And this is all because of reading. And I'm not alone. Ask any person that you admire who's achieved things that you find impressive. And I'm willing to bet anything that books and ideas to shape them. You see, the collective knowledge of thousands of years of history is available to you more easily than at any other point in history. So, recognize the power. My second piece of advice is this: find your gateway. For me, I love a good story. I love living in a different time or in different worlds where magic and adventure are available to me. The Tad Williams novels that I talked about earlier in the video was about two brothers, I think even probably the 1950s, 1960s. And their job was to travel around the world collecting live animal specimens for their father's zoo. Okay, looking back, probably not the most ethical of storylines, but I still get the adrenaline rush that I used to when I read their stories of diving for stingrays in the Pacific, or evading the bad guys in the Amazon jungle who were going to steal their animal specimen. Amazing adventure stories that just transport you to different parts of the world in different times. And the second series that I mentioned was by Brian Jacks. It's the Redwall series, and it's a novel about woodland animals. Actually, it's a novel series about woodland animals who live in or near a redstone abbey called Redwall. And the good animals, the mice and the hedgehogs and the moles, would live alongside the warrior animals, the hares and the badgers. And they would all fight the naughty animals, the rats and the foxes and the stoats and the weasels. Really brilliant, engaging storylines, adventures and battles and romance. And what I like about this novel series is you get to see the myths and legends evolve over generations and generations of characters in this Redwall Abbey. Brilliant. And even now, as you can tell, I love the pure escapism of these series. These were my gateway drugs, if you like, into reading. If someone had perhaps plunked a philosophy book into my lap, or a biography of some dusty old guy, I may never have fallen in love with reading the way I have. So my advice is this: go and explore. Go find your gateway. Go find your niche. For me, it's nonsense if somebody says to me that they don't like reading, because there are just so many flavors of books out there that for me it's just impossible to imagine that there isn't a flavor of book out there tailor-made to your own taste buds. My advice: go find your gateway. My next piece of advice is this, and I think this is important: quality over speed. I was looking this week and my YouTube homepage suggested videos that included titles like how I read 150 books this year, and, read 100 books in 2022 with me. And honestly, I cringe when I see those titles. Absolute nonsense. YouTube, you do not know me at all. And this is the reason I say that, because there are different reasons for reading: escapism, study, self-improvement, entertainment, and none of those reasons is best served with speed. Let me put it this way. If your goal in reading is escapism and entertainment, great. Then slow down. Savor the story. Take your time to live with the characters, taste what they taste, and go where they go. Why on earth would you rush that? Enjoy it. And if your main aim is to learn and study, then definitely don't rush it and worry about how many books you're reading a year. Take time to think with the author. Evaluate their choice of words and the merit of their arguments. Make notes to remember the important ideas that they spark in your mind. Interact with what you're reading. I never read without a pencil and piece of paper nearby, and I spend every day some time transferring some of what I'd learned into my external brain. So, quality over speed. And this leads me to a favorite subject of mine, and that is this: build an external brain. Here's a definition for you. An external brain is a physical or digital system of active idea capture which allows you to link ideas across time and to interact with these ideas in order to develop your own ideas. Now, I need an external brain system in my life for a simple fact. I can't rely on my brain alone to remember everything that I want it to remember. Simple. My brain has limited capacity, quite limited capacity. And so I forget most of the things that I read. Simple as that. And so for many years I've read and studied, I made notes in margins, I filled notebooks with notes, I collected PDFs and articles and URLs that I thought would be useful. I collected them, hoarded them even perhaps on apps like Evernote or Notion. But to be honest with you, this hoarding just led to me feeling lost and overwhelmed. I knew I was only benefiting a fraction of the potential power of all that reading that I would get done. And so, building on the ideas of a great guy called Dr. Zonka Ahrens in his wonderful book, How to Take Smart Notes, link below, I built a digital idea capture database, or a digital external brain system, which has transformed the way I study and the way I learn. And if you're interested in this idea, go take a look at my other YouTube videos on building an external brain. My next piece of advice is this: read for fun. Reading has the power to transport you, like I've said, to different worlds. You could be a detective in Victorian England. You can be an orc on a murderous rampage in some fantastical landscape. You can be a thief. You can be a king. You can be in space, or you can be in the center of the world. You can be anything and go anywhere that you want to through books. And different to TV and film, although don't get me wrong, I love TV and film, books force you to slow down and they invite you to be a participant instead of just an observer. Reading has the power to transport you to a different world in a way that perhaps I don't think that TV and film do. George R.R. Martin, that you might be familiar with, Game of Thrones chap, said this: "A reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. The man who never reads lives only one." I love that. And so, read for fun. Slow down. Choose a world to live in for a time. You know, I need to escape reality sometimes. I don't know about you, but I do, especially after work on a Friday. And so sometimes I'll just go to a coffee shop and I will live for 3 hours with a bunch of elves in a forest fighting some battles. My coffee will go cold, I'll barely notice the world go by, and for a while I'm somewhere else. And I love that. It's powerful. It's healing. Read for fun. And my final piece of advice is this: read to live well. Ryan Holiday, another favorite author of mine, said this: "The purpose of reading is not just raw knowledge, but it helps you find meaning, understand yourself, and to make your life better." Like I've said in this video already, I honestly can't imagine where I would be without books. I look back at the things I used to believe about myself and about the world around me, and honestly, I'm horrified. You know, I've sat down through books with some of the best thinkers in the history of the world, and I've learned so much about myself and the world around me from them. Heck, any day I like, I can sit down with a Greek philosopher that's been dead for 2,000 years. Heck, I can sit down with a Chinese philosopher that's been dead for longer. I can sit down with world leaders, with religious leaders, with comedians, with economists, with philosophers, with politicians, you name it. And this is why I started this channel, actually, to try and reach anyone who would pause and listen to me rattle on about things that really matter to me because of this. I truly believe that our lives are profoundly shaped by our ideas. I believe passionately that you are what you think. Let me put it another way for you. The quality of your life improves as the quality of your thoughts improve. And for me, books are wonderful pieces of wisdom passed down from people who have already been there, already done that. You see, books have the power to change our perspectives and our mindsets. They can spark inspiration and be used as a guide for us to live our best life. So, if, like me, you want to live a better life, have better thoughts, think more clearly and more accurately about yourself and the world around you, and I think the best way to do this is to recognize the power of reading, find your gateway, quality and not speed, build an external brain, read for fun, and read to live well. Listen, Thank you so much for watching this video, and I really hope that you find it helpful. If you also believe that you are what you think, please like this video and subscribe to the channel, and I'd love to hear from you. So if you'd like to write something, please put it in the comment section below.